Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs in the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 2007's Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, the conclusion to the Retro Studios trilogy that suddenly calls for an entirely new motion control scheme, thanks to the development and immediate success of the Nintendo Wii.
Following that is a game about riding down snowy slopes to a soundtrack that features foozed out vocals, 1998's 1080 Snowboarding.
Well, maybe we'll find out what that means. Tough to think about a theme that goes with these two games, but I suppose that they have icy environments, right?
I mean, my game is nothing but icy environments.
Ice, snow, what have you. Brio at one point turns into ice, and you're dealing with an almost Phendrana-like icy environment. It works. It works.
I could see it. I don't know. It's hard to match up a first-person shooter about being on an alien planet and also a game where you snowboard.
They're both Nintendo games at that, so I mean that works. Nintendo published. We'll take it. Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
It's been a little bit more Pokemon. I'm almost done with the decks. The only things holding me back are the entry for Koraidon, which I just got to find somebody that'll let me touch their Koraidon for a brief moment. And then the Legendary Quartet, and evolving that goddamn Gimmighoul.
Yeah.
That is the biggest pain in the ass evolution method they've ever made. And I still, I'm at maybe 400 coins. It's stupid. And those are basically all I am missing. So I'm very close. And then maybe I'll succeed at finding a shiny when I get the shiny charm. Because I tried to get a shiny Vaporeon a couple days ago, and after 2 hours of effort, didn't work out.
Did you get a shiny in your game at all?
The game says I have encountered 2 shinies. I have no memory of this.
Oh.
And I have not even seen one.
Interesting. I had one, in the last area of Area 0 before the final boss, so...
I'm seeing so many people, we have friends that are I saw 10 shinies throughout my time with the main story.
And look, if they did sandwiches, that's good on them, but I never got a single recipe. I'm still on 5 recipes. I don't care about sparkling bonuses or anything like that for sandwiches, but maybe that was part of it. I rolled credits on Pokemon as well, and so that was basically my game playing experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but as we've talked about, boy, it's held back by all the performance issues, and this game needed another year of development and refinement. Just don't crunch Game Freak like that. But a lot of great stuff there, and the music, that's going to be a top 10 soundtrack, I think, when it comes to best of 2022.
I think it might be my favorite soundtrack of the year as of currently.
It's a good one.
That might change in the next couple weeks, I don't know, but right now, I think I'm calling that one my favorite.
Interesting. Let's talk about some composer follow-up news. We've got a few headlines here. When we talk about plenty of composers on this show and then like to kind of follow up with them. How are they doing? What are they working on? How does that tie into game industry news nuggets? Let's start with River City Girls. And we talked about that game on episode 82. That game will be free to play on Nintendo Switch. They're doing a free timed trial for that game. It's for the next week, so available now, and it runs through the end of December 12th, at which point it'll be on sale for 50% off, so check that out. I think also Mass Effect Trilogy is going to be part of PlayStation Plus for the basic essential level there, so good to get that game on there and all of those Mass Effect experiences. So a pretty good time overall. There are a couple games leaving Game Pass that it's tough to see go, like Firewatch, I know, is one of them that's leaving soon. I think we haven't talked about it, but Lake's another one. So that's interesting on the different game subscription and what's free and what's not front.
If you like very, very laid back games, Lake is pretty good. I enjoyed it when I played it.
Give it a check before it goes away on the 15th then.
And it's not that long, so you definitely have the ability to do that. And also Eastward is coming to Game Pass. And you should play Eastward, all of you, everybody.
Music by Joel Korlitz on that one.
Yes, and probably among my favorite soundtracks of last year, like in general. The River City Girls thing, what that says to me is a River City Girls 2 release date is imminent.
Yeah.
Might not be this month, but I have a feeling we're going to find out very soon when that game is coming out. Because it's coming out in Japan in like 2 weeks, I think. It's coming out in Japan before it comes out here, which is weird considering it is a Western developed game. But hey, it's coming. Meanwhile, in a complete surprise announcement, I didn't expect this, Laura Shigihara, who we talked about for her work on the game Rakuen on episode 4, which she was also the developer for, she announced that she is getting ready to release a sequel to Rakuen, or as she describes it, the next game in the Rakuen universe. It is called Mr. Saito, and she is planning on launching it on Steam on March 23rd, 2023. And this is exciting. I'm very excited for that. And also still waiting for Rakuen to hit Switch.
Yeah, that for sure. But good for Laura Shigihara. Neat to see another game in that world, because that was a neat little game. Heavy on the emotions for sure, but a good little game nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is going to have the same sort of emotional tone to it. Maybe, maybe not. I'm wondering if this is going to be an Imposter Factory or a Finding Paradise, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yes, it's a good way to put it. If you're changing the protagonist to more of a salaryman as opposed to a young boy, different things to consider there with that perspective. And in a couple days after this releases, the Game Awards will happen, or as the Keeleys, you can shorthand it too. Just wanted to kind of get our thoughts out there. Like, what do we think will be revealed? We've got also the categories, the big ones that I think we'll pay a special attention to. Of course, Game of the Year, with nominees of A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The Score and Music category has A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Metal Hellsinger, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So we'll have to see. Joe, any thoughts first on those categories? What do you think will win? What would you like to win? What do you think will win?
So this might be the first year ever where I've either barely played or not played any of the games in the Game of the Year category.
Fun.
Elden Ring is the only one I've touched, and I can't really say I've played Elden Ring because I made it to the first boss and got stomped and haven't had the courage to go back since. And they could surprise us like they did with It Takes Two a couple years ago, where nobody expected that to be the winner. But honestly, it's going to come down between Elden Ring and Ragnarok, and I'm going to be real, I think Elden Ring has it. But it's going to be one of those two. Like, I believe wholeheartedly those are the two that it will be. Just based on the industry in general, I think Elden Ring's gonna take it in general. As for Score and Music, I don't know. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, hey, maybe they'll give it to Xenoblade. I think that'd be fitting.
I think that'd be nice. I think they're good nominees, and I think there are pockets of the industry that nominated those games for sure. I think for both categories, it is going to be between Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. I think Ragnarok might have an edge in the score category for best music, but I think you're right. When you're looking at who's going to be voting for the Game Awards, when Sekiro Shadows Die Twice won Game of the Year at the Game Awards in 2019, I think Elden Ring is going to get the nod, but it's certainly closer than we thought it was going to be, especially at the beginning of the year. So it should be interesting there. As far as reveals and all that, Hideo Kojima's in town. He's been kind of asking different questions on his social media and teasing certain events, and it would sure make sense to either get like Death Stranding 2 or whatever his next project is, whatever the Elle Fanning game is, to see that at the Game Awards. I would expect that. There was talk, as recording today, of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. That should probably be coming in mid-March of next year, if a Steam leak is any indication, but EA announced that we'll see gameplay at the Game Awards. There's some other interesting rumors floating around, like a website out of Spain, I believe, talking about a Metal Gear Solid remake, and not the one made by Virtuos from Metal Gear Solid 3. Like, maybe the MGS1 remake could be happening in sometime soon. Is it Game Awards soon? Maybe, maybe not. So, I mean, should be interesting, but I think Kojima being on stage to show something is probably a pretty sure bet.
I think that, yeah, I agree with that. I think we might see something from one of those Silent Hill projects. Like maybe we'll see gameplay of literally any of the others, because they didn't show any of it. If I had to guess, probably, was it Forte? Yeah, that's what it was called, right?
Yeah, F, yeah.
The one in Japan. I think that's the most likely that we would see if we saw any of it.
We'll get Monster Hunter Rise. That seems to be, it's going to be a digital release on Xbox and PlayStation, so it'll come away from Switch and PC. It'll come to those consoles. That seems to be making the rounds.
Might see a character from Street Fighter. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's always possible, too. Yeah, they're kind of leading up, piecemeal that out. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that could be there. I'm personally going to have it on in the Steam window.
Yes.
Because I'm a sucker, and maybe I'll win a Steam Deck. I won't, but maybe.
One can hope. All right, let's talk about the first of our two icy Nintendo games this week. The first one here, let's talk about Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Surprisingly, only the third Metroid game that we've ever brought to the show, which seems a little surprising. In episode 57, we talked about Super Metroid, and in episode 115, we brought the original Metroid Prime to the show. And we thought, maybe by this point we might have, Metroid Prime on Switch for its 20th anniversary.
Nah.
But we don't yet. That was kind of in the talking points of that Metroid Prime episode. It's like, it's a good candidate for it to be on Switch. No. But, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, originally released for Nintendo Wii in North America on August 27th, 2007. Europe got the game on October 26th, whereas Australia got the game on November 8th. Japan had to wait until March 6th, 2008. That's surprising. It was later re-released in August 2009 as a part of Metroid Prime Trilogy, which was a package that adapted the third game's motion controls to ports of the first two Metroid Prime games, and just gave it a 3-game package on Nintendo Wii. Made it super expensive for a while because they didn't make too many copies of Metroid Prime Trilogy. And then the price of that plummeted when the compilation was later re-released on the Wii U's Nintendo eShop on January 29th, 2015. That's probably the last place you can play Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. No adaptation for Switch yet. It is developed by Retro Studios and published by Nintendo. What is Metroid Prime 3 Corruption? Like the original Metroid Prime, it is a first-person Metroidvania action-adventure game. If you're just joining the show now and you're unfamiliar with the term Metroidvania, basically a big map that can be explored in certain ways by collecting specific items. Gameplay involves exploring a planet with multiple environment types, collecting suit upgrades, beam weapons, visors, and gunship upgrades this time around. You solve puzzles to reveal secrets, there's platform jumping, you're shooting foes with the help of a lock-on mechanism that allows for circle strafing while you're staying aimed at the enemy. And then the Wii Remote helps where you can kind of do a little more fine-tuning on the aiming there. There's also a third-person view that briefly happens when you're in the Morph Ball mode. But yes, the big change with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is releasing the game on Nintendo Wii, so there is a whole new control scheme that has to be added. Totally different than the first two games. With the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck, you have motion controls. Also, the game adds Hyper Mode, which is a feature in which a tank of health is drained to give Samus temporary invincibility and more powerful attacks. But after a certain amount of time, if you haven't used up all the energy, the player will enter Corrupt Hyper Mode, and you'll start gaining on this bar. But keep shooting, drain all that energy, because if you don't get it all out in time, you will have Samus be taken over by this nefarious Phazon energy, and it'll be a non-standard game over. So a kind of risk reward, give you some, temporary power boost, but make sure you use it, or else it's honestly one of those things like you're shocked by it the first time and then never again you know what to do to avoid the game over. So it's not too bad, honestly. The plot of Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Well, at the end of Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, the space pirates are in disarray following their defeat at the hands of Samus Aran, and this leads them to encounter Dark Samus, which is Samus's sinister doppelganger. And they're trying to harvest the powerful mutagen known as Phazon, but Dark Samus uses this as an opportunity to indoctrinate the space pirates into servants, and it continues its goal of spreading Phazon throughout the galaxy. So, meanwhile, Samus Aran and 3 other bounty hunters, Rundus, Gore, and Gandreda, receive orders to clear a virus from several organic supercomputers called Aurora units, which are located throughout the galaxy. But then, Dark Samus leads an attack on the planet Norian, sending a Phazon meteoroid called a Leviathan seed to the planet. Samus is lucky enough to repel the attack, take some damage from Dark Samus, and basically stops the Leviathan seed from implanting itself into Norian, but Samus falls unconscious, and she wakes up a month later to discover that she has Phazon energy that is trying to corrupt her from the inside, thanks to Dark Samus's attack. After she learns about her new suit modification that tries to harness this energy, Samus is directed to travel to other local planets, these being Brio and Elysia, to discover what happened to the other bounty hunters that were sent there to eradicate the Leviathan seeds there, because they have now gone silent. Big questions here. What happened to Rundus, Gore, and Gandreda? Will Samus be able to stop Dark Samus's plot of a galactic Phazon takeover, while also fighting a similar battle inside herself? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption?
So when it came out, I think I played like an hour of it. I rented it from the ancient establishment known as Blockbuster.
Oh, yes, back in the old times.
The very olden times. I remember nothing about it. And I haven't played it since. The only Metroid Prime game I've played is the first one, because of Smash Pieces. I will probably play it at some point after we do 2 for Smash Pieces. So I plan on playing it. I own it with Metroid Prime Trilogy. But who knows when I will actually get to it.
Yeah, and that's a really slow first hour, so I don't blame you for not having it grab you, especially if you hadn't played the original Metroid Prime. Wow. So I played it at launch. I enjoyed it. Had its little achievement system on Nintendo Wii. That was something. But I think I only played it one other time when I was going through Metroid Prime Trilogy. So it's been a long time. I remember playing this game in my college dorm room. I think that says quite a bit of, where I was the last time I remember playing this game. So It was one where there are certain tracks that, came to mind, and it was pretty easy to pull together a critical 5. But yeah, I remember certain things like, oh yeah, there's Brio, and it starts kind of volcanic and cavernous and all that, and then later it becomes filled with ice and little things like that, and it changes the music, and that's cool. The boss battles are pretty fun. They're unique, I think, compared to other Metroid Prime bosses, and interesting with the use of the Wii Remote and the nunchuck and using that control scheme, because obviously it would get retrofitted to the other two games and it would work, but that was certainly their big leap for this one. We talked about how with Metroid Prime, it was the big change of putting Metroid in 3D, and how are you going to do that? Well, with this one, it's adapting the Wii control scheme, and that's certainly the big challenge here. With the development of this game, Retro Studios intended to give Metroid Prime 3 Corruption larger environments than the previous game of Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, including open world features, and enable the game to run at 60 frames per second. They were also hoping to have more interactive sequences involving Samus's ship. However, when Retro learned of the Wii's technical specifications, they found the system was less powerful than they anticipated and had to scale back on those plans.
Wow, never heard that story before.
Pretty running theme there for the Nintendo Wii. And then after the Wii Remote was revealed, showing the concept of a new Metroid game at E3 2005, Nintendo demonstrated how Metroid Prime 3 would take advantage of the controller's special abilities with a version of 2 Echoes modified for the Wii that was shown at Tokyo Game Show 2005. Then at Nintendo's Media Summit in May 2007, Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aimé said that Metroid games never played this way before when referring to Corruption. He also noted that Nintendo employees who had seen the game in action claimed that it will, quote, reinvent the control scheme for a first-person shooter. I don't know if it did that. It adapted the concept pretty well, I think, on Wii, but it certainly didn't, revolutionize or reinvent anything. It just kind of showed you, okay, this is how you can do a first-person shooter on Wii. The Conduit, GoldenEye remake, some similar control schemes there for sure. Because, yeah, the control scheme was a big concern. The game director, Mark Pancini, thought that the gameplay had too many functions for the amount of buttons on the Wii Remote. Because this game was originally planned as a Wii launch title. It makes sense when they put it in the promotional materials alongside Red Steel. Remember that Ubisoft game? We talked about that game. That was a fun one with the Wii launch title, but showing how you can use the remote, as opposed to, the sword action in Red Steel, it's point and pew pew for Samus and Metroid. They did need to delay the game, obviously, and to give the team more time to work on tuning the controller and the scheme there, and this took about a year. But I think they got it right overall. Also, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is the first Metroid game to feature a significant amount of voice acting. I mean, right from the beginning, you have this guy from the Federation talking to you, and it's like, whoa, okay. And then it's Chris Sabat's voice coming out of Rundus. And it's like, all right, is this like DBZ up in here? It's certainly surprising. Obviously, Samus is not vocal herself, but a lot of characters around Samus certainly are talkative. The game reviewed very well with a Metacritic average of 90, higher than I remember it being. There were a lot of points of praise for this game. The gameplay, even the graphics at the time. There were some websites that were like, game graphics have never looked this good. And it's like, you do realize that there are like HD games on Xbox 360.
Talking about a Wii game, guys. Let's calm down.
A Wii game that's trying to be realistic. Like, some of those humans, still a little rough, let's be honest, but it's still really neat. It plays really well. And again, you have some mixed points about the Wii and its control scheme. I think for the most part, they were positive receptions, but you're not going to please everybody, especially when it's a brand new control scheme. But on the whole, they seem to do a really good job. And yeah, I do remember it reviewing well, but I didn't remember 90. That's pretty surprising. As of March 2008, 1.31 million copies of the game were sold worldwide. And then technically it would get more later on with the Prime Trilogy release, but it did okay. And Metroid games never really sold that well, especially on the Wii. When it comes to awards, well, 2007 certainly was quite a year in video games. And especially when you're talking about Wii video games, it is tough to match up against Super Mario Galaxy. That's why it was nominated for Best Wii Game at the Spike Video Game Awards, losing to Mario Galaxy. But Metroid Prime 3 Corruption was a no-show at the BAFTAs and the DICE Awards. IGN still gave the game Best Wii Adventure Title, Best Artistic Design, and Best Overall Adventure Game. So there you go for what it's worth. The legacy of Metroid Prime and Prime 3 Corruption. Well, the next Metroid Prime game would be 2016's Federation Force on Nintendo 3DS. But then Metroid Prime 4 was announced at E3 2017. And that is the game that's probably the biggest example of something that's in vaporware hell at the moment. Retro Studios restarted development in 2019 after taking over control from Bandai Namco. And we haven't heard a thing since, so who knows? Maybe they're planning it for the Switch's successor at this point. The composer that we'll talk about this week for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is Masaru Tajima. Masaru Tajima, not much out there about him, but he is a composer who has worked for Nintendo since 1994. After graduating with a music studies degree from Kyoto University of Arts, he first started in Nintendo's R&D 1 department, and later then in Nintendo SPD, where he's often collaborated with Kenji Yamamoto and other composers in various game soundtracks. What are those game soundtracks? Well, let's talk about his discography, because he started on Galactic Pinball, which was a game for Virtual Boy. So that kind of gives you a sense of when he started with Nintendo, and he did sound programming on that game. He also did sound programming on Tetris Attack, the 1996 Game Boy release of that game. He worked on sound on F-Zero Maximum Velocity and Pokemon Channel, and then he was sound director on WarioWare Touched, where he also composed Ashley's song and Mike's song.
A good song and a bad song.
Yeah. So he was the mind behind those original tracks, and he was also sound director later on Fossil Fighters. But then he worked on music on Metroid Prime Pinball, Excite Truck, oh yeah, that other game for Wii, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, Jam with the Band, Donkey Kong Country Returns, he was on that team. And then he's done some Art Academy games with Art Academy Lessons for Everyone, Pokemon Art Academy, Disney Art Academy, also did music for Style Savvy, Fashion Forward, and most recently he was credited in Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain, the 2021 release on Switch, where they just did a Nintendo Co. Ltd. Segment of their credits and just listed several people. So probably worked on some music or sound there. The soundtrack for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is a tricky one to talk about because there was never an official soundtrack release. So we know that music was composed by Kenji Yamamoto, Minako Hamano, and Masaru Tajima, but we don't know who did what track, or even if, is Minako Hamano just credited because she did the Ridley theme? Things like that. Like, she worked on Super Metroid, obviously did. Kenji Yamamoto did as well. We know Yamamoto did music, but when they don't have an official soundtrack release and they don't have specific tracks credited and all that, it's tough to say. So, video version, we've got Kenji Yamamoto et al. But who knows, honestly. With the game releasing on Wii, there was an increase of RAM that took place. And so from this switch from GameCube to Wii, This allowed for higher quality audio samples to be used and an overall better audio quality as a result. A little fact that was pointed out was that Kenji Yamamoto used Hirokazu Hip Tanaka's musical design of the original Metroid in Corruption by keeping the music and themes dark and scary until the very end, when uplifting music is played during the credits. So when we pick songs for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption to discuss in our 5 critical tracks for the game, what do they sound like? Are they all dark and scary? I don't know, most of them, I guess. I don't know if I'd say that about this first track here. Critical track number 1 for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. This is Title Theme. So while there is better audio quality, you can tell we're certainly still working with MIDIs, especially when you bring in vocals that don't necessarily sound like real live vocal performance, but you get the gist nonetheless. It's still a few months before Super Mario Galaxy would release on Wii. So this title theme is interesting because I think when you compare it to like the original Metroid Prime 3 title theme, very different. You're not getting the kind of insect-like worming its way into your ear sort of sound effects that the original Metroid Prime has. Instead, I feel like this one is probably inspired more by Halo, if I had to guess. There's like a very Halo feel to this song. And of course, again, different recording qualities, use of MIDIs and all that, but I definitely think of Halo with this one. It'd still be another month before Halo 3 would release in 2007, but you've got the feeling that like they're trying to capture that sort of same science fiction feeling, I think. It's interesting, and I kind of always forget that this is the title theme, but it's a pretty good one when you're getting to like the title screen and all that.
This is the only song I knew ahead of time. I absolutely adored this song when I first heard it, and for a very, very long time, and in fact, it might still be the only Metroid Prime 3 song that was on my iTunes for a very, very long time. I really, really like the eerie sort of feeling of this song. Yeah, the vocal MIDI is rough, but I think like being in the key that it is kind of helps it feel like more off-putting, if that makes sense. I think it works in general, and I really, really like this song, and it's gonna, much like the first Metroid Prime, my only regret with playing it on Trilogy when I do get to it is that I won't hear this song.
Yeah, that is true. That is the downside with Trilogy, that's for sure. Pretty early on in the game, though, you'll hear this track, number 2 on the Critical 5. This one is Brio Cliffside. This soundtrack definitely likes that vocal choral MIDI, so much so that they'll even use it for the lower male end of the spectrum there. And again, we'll reiterate that because this game did not have an official game soundtrack release, there isn't really a consensus of what the title is for these different songs. So when people say Brio Cliffside, that's kind of the guess of like, well, you play it on Brio when you kind of start at the cliffside. Later, there's like Brio Ice. That's what kind of people suggest when the terrain is turned icy on Brio. But yeah, the titles are just very simple because it's just trying to state where this takes place. And so this one's really cool. You kind of get the feeling of like lava, rocks. It's very similar to some of the lava kind of levels that you've heard in other different games with kind of tribal drums and chanting and like kind of a low melody that comes through. This one's a neat one, and I feel like as you start to get the hang of exploring in Metroid Prime 3, outside of the GFS Olympus and on Norian and all that, like this is the first planet where you're kind of like, all right, I've got these new powers. Let's see where it takes me. And you'll eventually battle Moganar and all that, which is also a neat boss track. But this is, I think, a good one for the Critical 5.
This song has some very good similar vibes to like classic Metroid. This sounds like, outside of the vocal MIDI, which is a little bit more high quality than you'd hear on this, it does sound like something that I could see being in like Super Metroid or something like that. But what is it with Metroid and, oh, this is a lava level? It needs to have deep vocals.
It's the lava level. So maybe it's a Yamamoto special there, let's just say.
I guess, because it's like every single one if he can do it. And he can't always, but like, I would say that there's even kind of that in Super Metroid when you go to Lower Norfair. There's sort of that same feeling. Like it feels very similar. They all sound like they have the same sort of attitude and tone, which is not a bad thing. Like that's a good theming to have. But it's just interesting to see that every time I hear a lava level song from a Metroid game, it's like, oh, yep, I could have told you that was a lava level without you even having to tell me.
100%. And, you know, whether that's a good or bad thing, I think we'll leave it up to you. If there's one track from Metroid Prime 3 that has to be here on the Critical 5, it's probably the coolest boss fight theme. And if you've got it in your head, you're probably right. It is indeed Rundus. Yep, turns out all those bounty hunters that you were friends with at the beginning and possibly even rivals, they also kind of fell prey to Phazon and they've been corrupted. Kind of goes with the game's theme, so you have to fight them. And so Icy Vegeta Boy over here, Rundus, gets just this killer boss theme.
Oh, when I play, I'm that's all I'm calling him now.
Well, I mean, you're going to listen to him and you're going to hear his voice, and then he kind of skates around on like, almost like Silver Surfer, like, but he's Iceman Silver Surfer. He creates these kind of ice paths to get around the battlefield. Anyway, yeah, this theme against Rundus comes out of nowhere. Sounds pretty different than I think a lot of Metroid things. Has a lot of the same elements. If I had to guess, maybe this is where Masaru Tajima comes in. No way to confirm that at all, but it comes across very differently than a lot of the other Metroid themes in a really cool way. And for these kind of bounty hunter confrontations, which are very different than I think a lot of the other Metroid Prime bosses, you kind of need a different feel for the different battle tracks. And I think this is like the first one that really kind of hits you like, oh, this is going to be a thing.
I can't really think of a lot of Metroid songs that have this same feeling. There are certain parts of the song where it's like, okay, this does sort of sound like something in Metroid Prime 1. But yeah, just in general, it feels different from anything else I can think of. And it sounds really neat. And I dig it a lot.
Yeah, the high squeaky synth, I think, definitely feels very Metroid Prime 1.
Mm-hmm.
The da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But then you get like that's a pretty decent electric guitar sample in there. Not gonna lie, and it goes pretty well with a lot of the other synths going on. And then, of course, the deep chorals. The chorals are everywhere. The vocals are everywhere. We get to another Bounty Hunter battle track for number 4 here on the Critical 5, and this one is Gandrada. I feel like this one uses a lot of those Metroid Prime-like elements. The percussion is relentless, but a lot of the kind of sound effect that comes in is like a weird kind of snare. It's like that's very much in the Metroid Prime sound font landscape there. You again get that kind of squeaky synth coming in. Of course, more chorals, more vocals. This one kind of puts all the pieces together. But I believe it's one of the last, if not the last, Bounty Hunter fight. And so there's kind of a deep sadness to this one because like Gandrada's like super skilled and probably could have been the leader of this unit, but she too fell prey to the corruption. There's a kind of sadness about this one, yet there's the oppressive feeling from the power of Phazon and the power of this fight.
I think this might be my favorite. I'd really, really like the sort of vibe that this one gives off, especially later on, like outside of the clip, where it just sort of goes into the chimes for a little bit. Like it feels way, way different, and also has like this weirdly creepy vibe to it as well, alongside the sad vibe. I don't know, everything about the percussion being like one of the main parts of the song, and I don't know, this whole song just sounds really, really cool. I really, really like this.
Yeah, it's definitely a standout on the soundtrack, and I feel like, Runda's had to be here, but I've got a soft spot for this Gandrada track as well. And as it all culminates to the final encounter that wraps up what was originally the trilogy of Metroid Prime games, I have to include this track here. This one is Dark Samus. Since we didn't talk about Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, what better time to bring up the main theme and leitmotif of Samus's sinister doppelganger of Dark Samus, who eventually, did make her way into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as a playable character. But yeah, this is definitely the Dark Samus theme, and technically it's like the first phase of the final boss encounter. As the threat grows bigger and bigger, you get into Omega Unit 313, and even through that track, the like that leitmotif is still going to continue through. That shows the corruption and the Phazon of Dark Samus and the looming threat there. So I feel like this one is probably the coolest. It's definitely a callback to the piece's original introduction in Metroid Prime 2. But just a little tweaked up as far as the final boss encounter. Really need to hear this one, and I think a good way to wrap up Metroid Prime 3's Critical 5.
I do like that, even though I can't, explain why it feels this way, it does feel like a very, very good sort of antithesis to the usual, themes of Samus herself.
Mm-hmm.
Which, Dark Samus, Doppelganger. That makes sense. This is a really cool, sinister sounding piece. I like it a lot.
For a couple tracks on the cutting room floor, I have two, and if we talk about Brio, then we have to go to Elysia, right? And the big track here for that planet is Skytown. I don't think it's wholly unique for a Nintendo game to have a track that sounds like this. In fact, it gives me big vibes of Midna's Lament in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. But it's a nice change of pace for the Metroid franchise and in Metroid Prime. And when you have this kind of city in the clouds sort of feeling with a lot of, connecting wires in a sense, when you're kind of high above everything and a lot of warm tones going on here, I think a track like this makes a lot of sense. And boy, we love those chorals going on.
Yeah, this has a really nice ethereal feeling to it. Though it's kind of weird that it sounds almost like you have walked through the gates of heaven, but like a creepy heaven? Which I guess that would be hell. I don't know. This is different from anything that I've ever heard in a Metroid game in general. I guess maybe there's some similar stuff in Prime 1. I don't know about Prime 2. I've barely heard any of the music from that game. But yeah, this is it's a different vibe, especially from the other tracks we've already talked about.
Creepy heaven is a good way to put it. And yeah, to represent Elysia, had to at least be here, I think. This other one, we'll throw it a bone. Good one to throw here on the cutting room floor. This one is Omega Ridley. When you first encounter Ridley in this game, it is literally just the Meta Ridley track from the original Metroid Prime. They're like, nope, it's so good that we'll just copy and paste this one wholesale. But later in the game, when Ridley 2 has been corrupted by Phazon, he gets this track, Omega Ridley, which turns his theme up even more, and I think, honestly, it hurts it. I don't think it's a great Ridley track. You don't even get the full, which is one of the more charming parts of the song, I think. But it really does amp it up. It's a pretty scary encounter overall, and worth mentioning, I think, here, because what's a Metroid game without a Ridley song?
Yeah, I think I agree with you that this is probably one of the weaker remixes of the Ridley theme I've heard. I think it narrowly beats out the one in Fusion, which I think is the weakest version of that song. But like Meta Ridley and the original version and everything, those are hard to beat. And this doesn't quite get there, unfortunately.
So what will I never forget about Metroid Prime 3 Corruption? It's honestly that Rundus battle track. That was one that's like the first with the bullet, like has to be on the Critical 5, and then we kind of work around it. And I think it's a good list overall, but it's been a long time since I played it. And it might be worth, digging out the Wii U and get that Metroid Prime Trilogy disc out of my collection and give it a spin. Because, for as many times as I've played the original Metroid Prime, I've never beaten 2. I've got pretty far in 2, but there's some boss shenanigans in that game that are super frustrating. And then, only, I think, beat 3 twice. And it's been years. It's been a very long time, and that's kind of scary to look back and think, oh, it's been between 10 and 15 years since I last played this game. Okay. So that's what I'll never forget about it.
I'm sure it'll be a bonus episode shortly after we finish Metroid Prime 2 for Smash to Pieces, so that'll probably be when I play it. In fact, I think that's the plan currently, at least.
You have my permission to call him Icy Vegeta Man.
Yes! That's literally the only name he's going to get. I've already forgotten his actual name. I don't care.
That's probably fine.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to giving it another shot when I am not a teenager with even less of an attention span than what I have now. So hopefully, as an adult going back, I should be able to push through a bit of a slow start to get in there and really get to the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it does some neat things, especially with the motion control there. All right, to transition to our next game, let's talk about a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever. Gotta be the Run This Battle. I'm like, who's done covers of this song? And there's one from Lacey Johnson Music on YouTube, Lacey Johnson Music. A pretty neat cover, if I do say so myself, and really gets in that cool groove there. So please enjoy that. We'll be right back.
Alright, let's change tones. We are no longer on a creepy alien planet or planets. We are now on, I guess, a mountain could be creepy? I don't think they're creepy here, but they could be creepy, so there you go. We're going to talk about 1080 snowboarding. Of course, that is a 1080-degree snowboarding, but I don't think anybody says the degree in the title, so, you know. It was originally released for the Nintendo 64 on February 28th, 1998 in Japan, came out on April 1st in North America, and then October 9th in the PAL regions. I read, this is the first time, I think the earliest, I have seen mention of reviewers straight up saying, I don't understand why it's been delayed so long in the PAL regions. It doesn't make any sense. The game is done. Because, as people might remember, that used to be really common. PAL had to wait months or sometimes like over a year for games that we got pretty shortly after Japan did. It was weird. It is a game that was developed and published by Nintendo, and it's a snowboarding game. You snowboard in it. That's the game. There are multiple game modes, including 2 trick modes, being Trick Attack and Contest, as well as 3 race modes, being Race, Time Attack, and 2-player mode, as well as a training mode. And depending on the mode, you either want to make it to the bottom of the track as fast as you possibly can, or score as many points as you possibly can by doing as many tricks as you possibly can on the way down. There are 24 tricks that you can perform, as well as 5 secret tricks. What that means, I do not know. And these are done using various motions on the analog stick, as well as combinations of the R, Z, and B buttons. It mentioned on Wikipedia specifically, the titular 1080 spin requires 9 actions, which is more than any other trick in the game. And that's the game. It's a snowboarding game. I don't know what else to say. You start out with 5 playable snowboarders. You can unlock 3 more by completing certain conditions. That's the game. The question would be, how good of a snowboarder are you, I guess? And this is where I will ask, what are our experiences with 1080 snowboarding?
I have 0 experience with this game. I feel like around this general time, the only extreme sports game, if you even want to call it that genre, the only one I was really familiar with were the Tony Hawk games. And that's it. So not owning an N64 and not even really ever being in snowboard culture, like never gone snowboarding in my life. Yet there is nothing that appealing about 1080 snowboarding for me. But they got a track in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, so there's something.
I have also never played this game. I have also never been snowboarding in real life, as evidenced by the fact that my neck is not broken, because I guarantee you I would hit the first tree that came my way. like, just, I don't trust myself to go snowboarding at all. Or skiing, even. But, I had heard of it specifically because of that song that's in Brawl, which we will talk about. That is in the Critical 5. But I had never, like, touched it. The closest to a sports game I had on the N64 was Mario Tennis. That's it. I don't play a lot of sports games. I think there was a period of time because of my dad where I played like one of the Tiger Woods PGA Tour games, and that's about as close as I got to playing sports games ever. So this Nintendo published one is no different, and I also don't know why I would have owned a copy of this game as a kid anyways. I genuinely did not know it existed until Brawl came out. So there's that. There's not a ton of information on this game as one might expect, but I did find some interesting things. So the game was developed between spring 1997 and early 1998, and the reason it released in Japan first and released so early, so much earlier than it came out anywhere else, is because Nintendo wanted to make sure that the game was released while the possibility of snow was still present in the whole country. Like, they wanted to still be able to release it while it was still snowing in Japan. And that's an interesting reason to want to release a game at a certain time, but I mean, I guess it makes sense. And the idea to make a snowboarding game actually started as the idea to make a skiing game, which was the idea of Shigeru Miyamoto, because he likes to ski, which continues his trend of if he has a hobby, he's going to make a video game out of it somehow. And this was after the completion of Wave Race 64, and he figured that, hey, a skiing game would be a neat place to go next. But trends at the time pointed towards snowboarding being the more popular down mountain activity, and snowboards were generally just more versatile than skis. Like, the Wikipedia article mentioned that one of the things was that a snowboard can go between trees instead of having to, like, give trees a wide berth on skis. That kind of thing. So, eventually the team relented, and they switched focus to snowboarding. Fun fact I did find, one of the programmers for the game was Giles Goddard, or Giles Goddard, could be either one of those. And he had previously been the person that programmed the stretchable Mario face at the beginning of Super Mario 64. So that's neat. A quote about the programming, and I barely know what any of this means, but it sounds interesting. According to Wikipedia, quote, when developing 1080, Goddard and Reed is the other programmer on the game, used a technique called skinning to eliminate joints between the polygons composing the characters. Their programming used a combination of standard animation and inverse kinematics, creating characters whose appearance during collisions is affected by what object is hit, what direction the collision occurs in, and the speed at which the collision takes place. So this might be among the first games. Obviously, I assume Tony Hawk did this before them, but it might be one of the first games that featured, like, dynamic wipeout animations. But I find it really interesting that the skinning thing, eliminating the joints between polygons, because we'll get into it in a second, but a lot of reviewers noticed that and commented on that kind of thing. The other interesting thing about this game is, much like Wave Race, there was a good amount of product placement in 1080 snowboarding. Most notably, there are Tommy Hilfiger outfits that you can wear, and Lamar branded snowboards. If you'll remember, Wave Race has the billboards that had to be changed for the Virtual Console release, and then were changed back for NSO, I think, which is weird, but there you are. The game reviewed pretty well upon release, 88 on Metacritic. It was lauded as one of the most impressive looking games on the N64 at the time, mostly due to that skinning thing we mentioned earlier, making the characters look less polygonal than typical characters on the console, or even in 3D games at the time, looked. But one of the big criticisms that it got was that its AI was stupid. And by stupid, I mean that the only way they could win was they had a habit of cheating, rubber banding really hard. But also, according to at least one reviewer, the AI seemed to be programmed to have a limited number of set paths that they could take down each track, and you could actually memorize when and where that computer player would fall down, so you could use that knowledge to pass them, because it would be the same place every time depending on what path they ended up taking. So they worded this as like, this makes it not super satisfying to pass these computers if I know exactly when I'm going to do it. Though they did give a lot of praise as well to the game's very impressive physics, especially when it came to the snow effects. According to them, sunlight reflects off snow realistically, and fluffy and packed snow looks and behaves differently from each other. It won the AIAS Console Sports Game of the Year Award in 1999. That's the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. And it was also nominated for Best Nintendo 64 Game at the CNET Game Center Awards in 1998. But of course it lost out to Ocarina of Time. Because of course it did. A sequel was actually released in 2003 for the GameCube called 1080 Avalanche. Snowboarding, 1080 Snowboarding, the N64 game, was re-released on both Wii and Wii U Virtual Console in 2008 and 2016 respectively, and it is set to release on Nintendo Switch Online sometime next year in 2023. So, if you haven't played it, you're gonna get a chance soon if you have Nintendo Switch Online and the expansion pack. So, we've talked about the main composer of this game already, but there's a vocalist credited on this soundtrack, and looking into this person went a place that I did not expect. So that vocalist's name is Wataru Yamaguchi, and he not only serves as the voice of the character Kensuke Kimachi in this game, but he provides vocals for 2 songs on the game's soundtrack. I couldn't find very much about him as a person, but I did find that he is not a musician at all. He's an illustrator who at least used to work for Nintendo. Specifically, he's the illustrator behind the original Super Mario 64 box art and the original Mario Party box art.
Oh.
He served as an illustrator or artwork supervisor on a huge list of games, including Ocarina of Time, Pokemon Stadium 2, Mario Tennis, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, Pikmin, and more. And the best thing that I found out about him is, you know those clay figures that were used for, like, Pikmin 2 commercials?
Yeah.
He made them.
Well, that's neat.
That was him. I'm not sure where he is now. All of his credits on any of the websites I could find, like Moby Games and fan wikis and all that, they all end with Mario Kart Wii in 2008. So I don't think he's at Nintendo anymore, and I couldn't find any evidence of him being anywhere else, so he might have left the industry. I don't know. In terms of his discography, though, 1080 Snowboarding is the only place where he appears on the soundtrack. He doesn't do anything anywhere else. I would love to find out how he ended up doing vocals for this game, but I couldn't. But he also did a little bit of voice work in the sequel, 1080 Avalanche, so there's that as well. The soundtrack itself, though, was composed by Kenta Nagata, who we talked about back in episode 2 for his work on Wind Waker. And Nagata describes the soundtrack as, quote, techno and rappy beats with thrashy, foozed-out vocals. And I don't know what any of those words mean when put together, especially the description of foozed-out vocals. That's not a word.
I was gonna say, I was hoping to find out what that might mean.
I wish. But Yamaguchi himself actually provided the vocals for the songs Grasp Power, as well as critical track number 1. This is Vacant Lives. This song is a pretty good indication of how the soundtrack goes in general. It starts out fairly typical with like this hard rock sort of feeling to it, and then it just gets weird when the vocals come in. This song is absolutely bizarre. I dig it, it's very unique, and I can't think of another game that has music that sounds quite like this, but it's so weird. This whole soundtrack is weird, in a good way, but it's bizarre, and this is the first piece of evidence for that. I should note, I don't know where most of these songs play, mostly because I've never played it, and it's a sports game, so it's kind of hard to go, like, look it up. If I do know where it is, that's because somebody mentioned them in the YouTube comments, so there's that.
You know, I was wondering, like, okay, vocals on N64... they've got to be pretty compressed. And, you know, sure enough, it is. I didn't expect, I think, this level of, like, there's some, like, pitch shifting going on or something. But, you know, it does give you the thrashy kind of extreme feeling to it. So I think mission accomplished for especially what their limitations are on Nintendo 64. But you know what? Way to work it out.
Yeah. You know what else you could work? You could work critical track number 2, which is called Work Your Body.
Work your body, work your body, work your body, work your body. Push it in. Work your body, work your body, work your body, work your body. Push it out.
So, I know this is probably an overused comparison, but when I hear this, it reminds me of what Jet Set Radio would sound like just 2 years later. There were just 2 years between this and Jet Set Radio, by the way. That kind of blew me away.
Oh my God.
But that's what it reminds me of the most. And I don't know, I dig the groove of this song. It's still really weird, but I don't know, I like it. It's fun.
This opened up a once forgotten memory. You say, like, here it is, Work Your Body. I'm like, oh no, is it it's this song. I've heard this song before. Maybe it goes back to like friends who had an N64, and maybe because this is what the character select theme.
I think I couldn't find evidence as to what it is, but I think that's correct.
Yeah, if my weird repressed memory is any indication, I think that's what it is. Wow, have not thought about this song for literally 20 years.
Critical track number 3 is actually the only song that I knew before doing research for this episode. This is Golden Forest. I'm going to assume that this song is popular because it is untouched in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It is not a remix. They just took this song and they dropped it into the game. And I believe it's been in every Smash since, in some form. It's cool. It's a nice little rock theme. It's a lot different from the other two songs, mostly because there's no sampling or vocals. It's just guitar and an electric organ. And it fits really well. I think it is pretty catchy in general, but it's so different. It's the only one where I don't listen to it and think like, this is weird. I don't know. It's good though. I like it.
Yeah, I agree. It's it definitely continues with like kind of the harder metal. And you're right, 100%. Those who have played Super Smash Brothers, going back to Brawl and all the games through it. I don't know how often this appears on a Smash stage, but you know what? This is probably where you've heard it before. So I feel like it's a good song to kind of keep that energy that you're going to hear throughout the game. I don't know why it's this one that's always pulled from this game, but it's a fun one.
You know what's weird? I think I do remember where this song plays. I think this song plays on Norfair in Brawl.
Yeah. And it's like, why?
That's a weird place to put it.
There you go. You got a Metroid connection. It's kind of working out. Working your body. Work your body.
Why would you put the snowboarding song on the lava level? Whatever. I can't ask questions. Sakurai knows what he's doing, and also the person that probably actually made that decision knows what they're doing, I guess. Critical track number 4, actually, I think is my favorite of the songs that I heard while preparing for this episode. This is Blue Flame. Why does this sound like a battle theme in a Shin Megami Tensei game?
Oh, it sure does. Wow.
Like, I feel like I should be fighting demons to this song, not snowboarding down a mountain. I like the tone a lot, but it sounds like a boss theme. And I think from what I can tell, this plays during some races, which makes sense, competitive, that, there you go. But, like, this does not sound like it belongs in the genre that it is coming from, but I really like it. I kind of want to put this to a video of an SMT battle to see how well it does actually fit. But otherwise, yeah, this is my favorite, I think, in general.
Yeah, definitely would fit in that environment, especially when it does the it kind of like mixes up a little bit. Like, yeah, that feels like a Shin Megami Tensei like JRPG battle. I could see that. Yeah, it's interesting how like the guitars are going to sound how they sound, and that is it, and that's what we've got to work with. But they do enough rhythmic variation, I think, to keep it fresh.
I think the guitars on this soundtrack are pretty impressive for a Nintendo 64 game in general. And the last track on our critical track number 5, this is Lost. Now, if that ain't some tonal whiplash, I don't know what is. As far as I could tell, this seems to play when you've failed, like the Game Over song, which, would make sense since it's called Lost. And it's weird because it's really low-key and simple compared to everything else. And honestly, it's slightly more upbeat than I would have expected a Game Over theme to be. But, like, I don't know, I kind of dig it. It feels almost soothing in a certain way, and also just, like, that percussion's doing some work. It's really, really good. This is a really, really good song, I think.
It completely feels like the underscore of the Mario Kart Wii character select theme. Like it's just missing the bum bum ba da bum 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 ba da dum bum ba. Like you just throw this back, it's the underscore. That is exactly the impression I get. Yeah, I don't get, Lost vibes from it. You lost this race, but all right, it keeps peppy enough. But wow, did not expect to hear this.
You know what it is? If Blue Flame is an SNT battle theme, Lost is the battle results theme.
Sure. I get that. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's kind of on the race results screen, but you just didn't win.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, that's what it is. The 2 tracks on the cutting room floor. These 2 are here because when I heard them, well, you can hear for yourself. The first one is called Dance.
I like that big. I like that. I like that. I like that big. There goes the boom. I like that. Rock me, baby. There goes the boom.
There goes the boom. What the hell is this? This is an absolutely bizarre song. And much like the other song on the cutting room floor, probably the weirdest use of samples on the entire soundtrack.
Oh, without a doubt. Especially...
Yeah, this song is absolutely bizarre, and when I heard it, I knew I needed to make sure other people heard it. So, you're all welcome.
That's 100% fair. It's kind of like that Persona 4 track in the theater. With sorry, I couldn't make the music louder. I cannot taste it because of my dream. Like, while that one has like a sultry vibe to it, this is just, I'm peppy and I want to dance.
There goes the boom.
There goes the boom.
Oh, just so weird. The other one is not there so much because it is weird in general as a song, but just, well, again, hear for yourself. The other song on the cutting room floor is Give It To Me.
Give it to me. Give it to me. Give it to me good. Don't need your bad love, baby. Give it to me. Give it to me. Give it to me good. Don't need your bad love, baby.
As far as I can tell, this plays on the record screen. This is a really weird vibe for a first-party Nintendo game.
I take it back, and I was talking about the theater in Persona 4. It's like this.
Like, I dig the groove of this song a lot, but this is a really weird vibe for Nintendo in general. Like, this is bizarre. I don't know how to process this being a thing that's in an N64 game that Nintendo made. It's weird.
You're wild for this one, Kenta Nagata, but I respect it.
Yeah, they apparently just didn't give him any oversight.
They didn't listen to this, clearly.
Cause like, I'm glad I'm not crazy, and you agree that that vibe is there. Cause that's the only thing I could think of when I got to this song. I don't know how to process it. It's bizarre. So what will I never forget about 1080 Snowboarding? I've never played it. Maybe next time we do an N64 night on the NWR Twitch channel, which we've done a couple of times now. By then it might be on there, and maybe we can do 2-player 1080 Snowboarding. Who knows? We did Wave Race last time. That game is really hard to control. I don't know what to expect from it. Now that I've heard some of the soundtrack, I mean, I'm going to be real. This is probably the most unique soundtrack of Nintendo in that era. It might actually still be one of the more unique Nintendo soundtracks in general that I have heard. I should mention this was a listener suggestion. That's why we ended up doing it. And I'm very happy that suggestion was brought up because I had never heard most of the soundtrack, and honestly, Golden Forest being the one that made it into Smash, they picked the most boring option that they could have picked. It's a good song, but they could have picked some weirder crap in there, and I think that would have been fun.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I'm still just stunned that like, oh yeah, Work Your Body is from this, and wow, core, not, I don't know, I want to say core memory, but like repressed music memory in video games unlocked. Yeah, that's a thing. Wow. My eyes are opened, and it's interesting to hear a Nintendo game at this time use all of these vocal samples in this way. That you're right. I think Jet Set Radio is like the next interesting comparison just a couple years later. Wild.
I can't even... Is there another Nintendo game now that uses samples like this?
Probably not like this, no. Mm-mm.
I don't think there's a modern example. Like, I do genuinely think this might be one of the more unique soundtracks that Nintendo has ever had from a first-party game. And that's pretty cool.
Some icy Nintendo games this week as we get closer to the end of the year. We've got Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, and you're revisiting Brio there, and then you're going down the slopes with 1080 Snowboarding. A good week this week on Original Soundchat. I'm happy with this one. That'll do it for us. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but that's that MP3 podcast version that you want. And that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. It's where Joe's other podcast, Masterpieces, is hosted. You can find that and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Podcast catchers all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but we also have a Spotify playlist, or if we talk about a video game track and it's on Spotify, anywhere, it gets added to this big monster playlist. Oh, it's Nintendo games this week, so we're probably not adding anything from this episode, huh?
Yeah, no, these both first-party Nintendo games means not on Spotify or on anything.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Let us know your favorite game soundtracks so far of 2022. We're starting to pull together that episode. That's interesting. Also, give us some suggestions for games to cover in the future. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Yuchong Wong.
And I will be talking about Masahiko Yoshimura. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So, sometimes when you go looking for these fan covers and fan remixes, you stumble upon something where your first thought is, where did you even get the idea to do this? And this is one such week that happened, because the ending theme today comes courtesy of the YouTuber Musical Wolf. That's Wolf with an E at the end. And it's Golden Forest, except it's sad piano.
Oh.
And it works weirdly well, and I don't know how the idea came to him, but hey, you know what? Good for you.
Well then, that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.